Welcome to our channel, where real American crime cases, broken down clearly and honestly. Relax and watch us uncover up to 4 or more cases uncovered in this one video you are about to start watching. Welcome to American Crime Vault. Living together, a dream for many couples, can sometimes turn into a nightmare. What happens when the person you trust most becomes your greatest adversary? Today, we re-diving into a case that started with a seemingly simple domestic dispute, but spiraled into a complex web of accusations, legal battles, and a police investigation that uncovered something far more sinister than anyone imagined. This is the story of how a marriage fell apart and a wife's complaint led to a standoff that law enforcement couldn't ignore. It all began on a quiet suburban street, the kind of place where neighbors know each other's names and kids play in the front yards. For Mark and Jessica, this was their slice of paradise, a home they'd built together. But behind the closed doors of their beautiful two-story house, a storm was brewing. Tensions that had been simmering for years finally boiled over one fateful Tuesday evening. The initial call to the police was for a verbal altercation, something officers see every day. Jessica claimed Mark had become increasingly controlling and aggressive. Mark claimed Jessica was unstable and making things up. At first glance, it seemed like a classic he said, she said situation. The officers who responded, Officer Davis and Officer Chun, tried to mediate. They separated the couple, listened to their stories, and advised them to spend the night apart to cool off. Mark agreed to go to a friend's house. It seemed like a routine resolution, but as the officers were about to leave, Jessica pulled Officer Davis aside, her voice trembling. She said, "There's more. There's something in the garage you need to see. He told me never to go in there." That statement changed everything. It was no longer just a domestic dispute. It was the start of an investigation. What could be in the garage that was so secret? With Jessica's permission, the officers approached the locked garage. Mark had taken the only key, but Jessica remembered a spare hidden under a loose brick by the back door. As Officer Chin fumbled with the lock, a sense of unease filled the air. The garage door creaked open, revealing not just tools and old furniture, but a scene that immediately raised red flags. In the corner, partially covered by a tarp, was a large, industrial-grade safe, the kind you don't just buy at a local hardware store. And next to it, several strange, sealed containers. The air had a faint chemical smell that was hard to place. Officer Davis knew they were now in territory that required a warrant. They secured the scene, ensuring nothing could be tampered with, and immediately began the process of getting judicial approval to search the entire property, specifically the garage and the mysterious safe. Jessica was taken to a safe location, her initial fear now mixed with a dawning horror. What had her husband been hiding right under their noses? The man she had married, the father of her children, was suddenly a stranger. While waiting for the warrant, investigators started digging into Mark's background. On the surface, he was an ordinary guy, a successful accountant, well-liked at his firm, a respected member of the community. There was nothing to suggest a hidden life. He had no criminal record, not even a speeding ticket. It all seemed too perfect, too clean. This spotless record made the contents of the garage even more suspicious. People with nothing to hide usually don't have industrial safes and mysterious chemical containers locked away. The warrant came through in the early hours of the morning. A specialized forensics team was called in. The entire neighborhood was now awake, with flashing lights painting the quiet street. The forensics unit began their meticulous work. They photographed everything, cataloged every item, and carefully took samples of the substances in the containers. The safe, however, was the main event. It was a high-security model, and without the combination, they had to bring in a specialist to crack it. The tension was palpable as the safe cracker worked, the quiet clicks of the dial echoing in the silent garage. Meanwhile, detectives had located Mark at his friend's house. When they arrived, he was calm, almost eerily so. He insisted the whole thing was a misunderstanding, a dramatic overreaction from his wife. He claimed the safe was just for storing valuable family heirlooms and important documents. He willingly agreed to come down to the station for an interview, confident he could clear his name. But his composure began to crack when detectives mentioned they were getting a warrant to open the safe. A flicker of panic crossed his face before he quickly masked it. It was a small tell, but the seasoned detectives noticed. Back at the house, after what felt like an eternity, the safecracker finally succeeded. With a heavy thud, the safe door swung open. The officers and forensic team peered inside, and what they found was shocking. It wasn't heirlooms or documents. The safe was filled with stacks of cash, totaling nearly $500,000. Alongside the money were multiple fake passports with Mark's picture but different names, a collection of burner phones, and a ledger. The ledger was the key. It was filled with cryptic entries, codes, and a list of names and dates. This discovery turned the case on its head. This wasn't about a marital dispute anymore. Mark wasn't just a controlling husband. He was living a double life. The forensic analysis of the containers in the garage came back with equally disturbing results. They contained precursor chemicals used in the manufacturing of illegal synthetic drugs. The quiet accountant from the suburbs was seemingly involved in a sophisticated criminal operation. The ledger appeared to be a detailed record of his illicit transactions. Armed with this new evidence, the detectives confronted Mark again. His cool demeanor evaporated. Presented with the contents of his safe and the lab results, his story crumbled. The initial denials gave way to a grudging confession. Mark revealed he had been laundering money for a major criminal syndicate for years. His accounting skills made him the perfect person to clean dirty money, making it appear legitimate. He was a crucial cog in a massive machine, and his seemingly perfect life was the perfect cover. He explained that the pressure had been getting to him. The constant fear of being discovered, the lies, the double life. It was all taking a toll, making him paranoid and volatile at home. His fight with Jessica was a direct result of that pressure boiling over. He never imagined that the one person he was trying to protect his secret from would be the one to expose him. In a strange twist of fate, the breakdown of his marriage was what led to the breakdown of his criminal enterprise. The investigation expanded rapidly. The names in the ledger led to a series of raids across the state, dismantling a significant portion of the drug and money laundering ring. Dozens of arrests were made, all stemming from that one initial call from a frightened wife. Jessica was in shock. She had to reconcile the man she loved with the criminal he turned out to be. The life she knew was a lie, built on a foundation of deceit. It was a devastating realization, but her courage to speak up, to say there's more, had brought a dangerous operation to a halt and likely saved many lives. This case serves as a powerful reminder that sometimes the biggest dangers are hidden in plain sight, concealed behind a facade of normalcy. It also highlights the incredible bravery of those who speak out, even when they are afraid. Jessica's initial call about a domestic issue uncovered a far-reaching criminal conspiracy that even seasoned detectives found staggering. Her dispute with her husband was the one thing the syndicate couldn't control, the loose thread that unraveled their entire network. The police couldn't ignore her plea, and in doing so, they uncovered a truth that was darker than anyone could have imagined. Thank you for watching. This story shows how complex people's lives can be and how one person's courage can make a huge difference. If you found this story compelling, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into fascinating cases. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching once again. Can't wait to share the next true crime story from somewhere else in the world. Stay tuned. Imagine pouring your heart, soul, and savings into a dream, only to watch it crumble at the hands of the one person you trusted most. This isn't just a story about a failed business. It's a tale of ambition, friendship, and a devastating betrayal that spiraled into a criminal nightmare. Our story begins with two college friends, Alex and Ben. Alex was the visionary, the creative genius with a knack for spotting trends. Ben was the numbers guy, practical, meticulous, and with a charm that could sell ice to an Eskimo. They were the perfect pair. While still in their dorm rooms, they sketched out a plan on a pizza box for an innovative tech startup called ConnectSphere, a social platform designed to connect people based on shared real-world activities, not just online profiles. Their energy was infectious. They spent sleepless nights coding, fueled by cheap coffee and an unshakable belief in their idea. After graduation, they pooled their life savings, took out loans, and officially launched ConnectSphere. The early days were a blur of hard work and excitement. They celebrated every small victory, from their first 100 users to securing a small office space that was barely bigger than a closet. They weren't just business partners, they were brothers united against the world. And the world started to notice. ConnectSphere began to grow, attracting media attention and, more importantly, investors. The first round of seed funding felt like winning the lottery. Suddenly, their dream had wings. They moved to a bigger office, hired a small team, and the user base exploded. Alex was constantly innovating, adding new features, while Ben masterfully handled the finances and investor relations. On the surface, they were the quintessential startup success story. But beneath the polished exterior, cracks were beginning to form. As the company's valuation soared, the pressure mounted. The once casual partnership became strained. Alex, focused on product development, was often oblivious to the company's financial intricacies, trusting Ben completely. He saw Ben's late nights at the office as a sign of dedication, not a red flag. He didn't question the increasingly lavish lifestyle Ben was leading. The fancy cars, the designer suits, the expensive vacations. Ben just laughed it off, saying they had to look the part for their high-profile investors. The first real warning sign came during a quarterly review. Alex noticed some discrepancies in the expense reports. Large, vaguely described payments to consulting firms he'd never heard of. When he questioned Ben, his partner was smooth, dismissive. Just strategic partnerships, Alex. Boring stuff. You focus on the tech, I'll handle the business. That's our deal, right? Alex, wanting to avoid conflict and trusting his friend, let it go. It was a mistake he would regret for the rest of his life. The truth was, Ben was weaving a complex web of deceit. He had set up several shell corporations. These were fake companies, existing only on paper, with him as the sole beneficiary. He would then create fraudulent invoices from these shell companies to ConnectSphere for services rendered, services that never existed. He would approve the payments himself, effectively funneling millions of dollars directly from their company into his own secret bank accounts. Meanwhile, Alex was working harder than ever, trying to keep ConnectSphere ahead of the competition. He felt a growing distance from Ben, who was now often unavailable, locked in important meetings that Alex was never invited to. The camaraderie that had once defined their partnership had evaporated, replaced by a cold, corporate formality. The office culture soured as well. Employees loyal to Alex felt a sense of unease, while a new clique, hired by Ben, seemed to operate by a different set of rules. The house of cards began to teeter when a major investor requested an unscheduled, deep dive audit. They were considering a massive new round of funding, but something in the books had spooked them. Panic set in for Ben. He tried to stall, to cook the books further, but the auditors were thorough. They were professionals who smelled fraud a mile away. Alex will never forget the day it all came crashing down. He was called into a sterile boardroom with the company's lawyers and the auditors. Ben was already there, looking pale and defeated. The auditors laid it all out, document by document, transaction by transaction. The shell corporations, the forged invoices, the secret offshore accounts. The scale of the betrayal was staggering. It wasn't just a few $1,000s. Ben had embezzled nearly a third of the company's total investment capital, over $10 million. The feeling for Alex wasn't just anger. It was a profound, gut-wrenching sadness. The person he had built his dream with, the friend he had trusted like a brother, had systematically plundered their creation for personal gain. Every late night, every sacrifice, every shared dream now felt like a lie. While Alex was building the company, Ben was busy building his escape route, paid for with their future. The fallout was catastrophic. The news broke, and ConnectSphere became toxic overnight. Investors pulled out, users fled the platform, and the company spiraled into bankruptcy. The dream was dead. The team Alex had carefully built was laid off. Everything they had worked for was gone. But for Ben, the nightmare was just beginning. The audit results were handed over to federal authorities. He was arrested and charged with multiple counts of wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. The legal battle was swift. The evidence was overwhelming. The charming salesman couldn't talk his way out of this one. He was found guilty on all counts. The image of Ben, the once confident entrepreneur, being led away in handcuffs became a symbol of corporate greed. He was sentenced to years in federal prison. He lost everything: his freedom, his reputation, and the fortune he had stolen, which was seized to partially repay the defrauded investors. For Alex, the journey back was long and arduous. He lost his company, his savings, and his faith in people. The betrayal left a deep scar. For a long time, he couldn't even think about starting another business. But the spirit of the innovator, the dreamer, is hard to extinguish. After years of healing and reflection, Alex started to dabble in new ideas, this time with a lot more caution and a much smaller circle of trust. This story serves as a stark reminder. In the exhilarating world of startups and business, where trust is a necessary currency, it's crucial to remember that checks and balances aren't a sign of distrust. They're a foundation of a healthy, sustainable partnership. The story of ConnectSphere isn't just about a company that failed. It's a cautionary tale about how easily a shared dream, built on friendship, can be destroyed by greed and betrayal. It shows that the most dangerous threats sometimes come not from competitors, but from the person sitting right next to you. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories behind the headlines. Stay safe and always be vigilant. Thanks for watching once again. Can't wait to share the next true crime story from somewhere else in the world. Stay tuned. What happened in that Wellington mansion after midnight? This is a story that has baffled investigators for years, a tale of love, wealth, and a secret that refused to stay buried. Welcome back to our channel, where we uncover the truth behind the headlines. Today, we're diving deep into the Wellington marriage case, a mystery that began with a fairy tale wedding and ended in a police investigation that shook the city to its core. The story starts with Eleanor Vance, a quiet librarian, and Julian Wellington, a charismatic millionaire. They met, fell in love, and were married in a lavish ceremony that was the talk of the town. They moved into Julian's sprawling estate on the outskirts of Wellington, a place of grand halls and beautiful, manicured gardens. To the outside world, they were the perfect couple, living a life of idyllic bliss. But as we all know, appearances can be deceiving. Just 6 months after their wedding, a frantic call was made to emergency services from the Wellington estate. What paramedics found was a scene of chaos and confusion. Julian Wellington was found unconscious at the bottom of the grand staircase, and Eleanor was nowhere to be found. The initial theory was a tragic accident. Perhaps Julian had slipped and fallen. But as detectives started digging, the pristine image of the happy couple began to crumble. The first clue was a hidden safe in Julian's study. Inside, they didn't find stocks or bonds, but a collection of old letters and a private investigator's report. The report was on Eleanor. It turned out Julian had been investigating his own wife just weeks before his fall. Why? The letters revealed a secret past Eleanor had desperately tried to keep hidden. She wasn't the simple librarian everyone thought she was. Years ago, she had been known by a different name and was connected to a major financial scandal in another city. She had disappeared, changed her identity, and started a new life. Now, investigators had a motive. Did Eleanor push Julian to stop him from exposing her? It seemed plausible. The search for Eleanor intensified, turning from a missing person case into a manhunt. But she had vanished without a trace. Her car was still in the garage, her passport on the nightstand, and her wallet untouched. It was as if she had simply evaporated into thin air. Friends and family were questioned. Julian's business partners described him as sharp and sometimes ruthless, but deeply in love with Eleanor. Eleanor's few friends from the library were shocked. They described her as kind, gentle, and incapable of harming anyone. The staff at the Wellington estate painted a more complicated picture. They spoke of hushed arguments late at night, doors slamming, and a growing tension in the house. One housekeeper mentioned hearing a heated conversation about a prenuptial agreement on the night of the incident. The police were stuck. They had a motive, but no suspect, no witnesses to the actual event, and no physical evidence tying Eleanor to a crime. Julian, meanwhile, remained in a coma, the only person who truly knew what happened that night, unable to speak. The case grew cold. The public's fascination waned, and the Wellington marriage case became another unsolved mystery, a ghost story whispered among the city's elite. Years passed. The Wellington estate was sold, its grand halls now empty and silent. The case file gathered dust in a cold case unit. But then, a breakthrough came from the most unexpected place. A woman walked into a police station in a small coastal town hundreds of miles away. She looked weathered, older, but her eyes were unmistakable. It was Eleanor Vance. She hadn't come to confess. She came to tell her side of the story. On that fateful night, she and Julian had argued. He had confronted her with the private investigator's report, with her past. He wasn't angry, she explained, but hurt that she hadn't trusted him with her secret. He told her he loved her, no matter what, and that they would face it together. According to Eleanor, as they were reconciling on the landing of the grand staircase, a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness. It was Julian's estranged brother, a man who had been cut out of the family will and was desperate for money. He had been secretly living in a forgotten wing of the massive estate for weeks, listening, waiting. He demanded money from Julian, threatening to expose Eleanor's past to the press himself if he wasn't paid. A struggle ensued. The brother, in a fit of rage, shoved Julian. Julian lost his footing and tumbled down the stairs. Panicked, the brother threatened Eleanor, telling her if she went to the police, he would frame her for the whole thing. He told her to run, to disappear, and that he would make sure she was blamed. Terrified and in shock, Eleanor fled into the night, living a life on the run, haunted by what she had witnessed. Her story seemed incredible, almost too convenient. But then she provided a piece of evidence she had held on to all those years. A small, unique cufflink she had ripped from the brother's shirt during the struggle. It matched a set that was missing from his collection. Armed with this new evidence and Eleanor's testimony, police reopened the case. They located Julian's brother, who, after years of living off a mysterious inheritance, finally confessed. Julian eventually awoke from his coma, but with no memory of the event. Eleanor, cleared of all suspicion, chose not to return to her old life of wealth. The trauma had changed her. She found peace in the small coastal town where she had hidden, rebuilding her life, this time on her own terms. The Wellington marriage case was finally closed, not with a simple answer, but with a complex story of secrets, betrayal, and a love that was tested in the most extreme way. It serves as a chilling reminder that behind every closed door, there's a story waiting to be told. What do you think about this incredible turn of events? Let us know in the comments below. And if you're fascinated by mysteries like this, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next investigation. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching once again. Can't wait to share the next true crime story from somewhere else in the world. Stay tuned. Ever found yourself checking your mirrors for a police car after making a tiny driving mistake? We've all been there. But what if that minor slip-up, that thing you barely even noticed, spiraled into a decade-long legal saga, a high-speed chase, and a case that would echo through the highest courts? This is one of those stories. It's a wild ride that starts on a quiet California road with something as simple as a missing license plate. You won't believe where it ends up. Our story begins back in 2014 in sunny California. A veteran police officer with years of experience under his belt is out on patrol. It's a day like any other. The sun is shining, traffic is moving, and everything seems normal. But then he spots it, a pickup truck. At first glance, nothing seems out of the ordinary. But as he gets closer, he notices something is missing. The truck has a temporary registration tag in the back window, but it doesn't have a permanent, state-issued license plate. Now, for this officer, that's a potential red flag. In his experience, a missing plate can sometimes be linked to stolen vehicles or other issues. It's a small detail, but in police work, small details can mean everything. The officer decides to run the truck's vehicle identification number, the VIN. The dispatch comes back clean. The truck isn't reported stolen. It's registered to a man named Arthur Lopez. For a moment, it seems like a dead end. But the officer isn't satisfied. He decides to pull the truck over. His reasoning? He wants to confirm that the driver, Arthur Lopez, is aware of the missing plate and to make sure everything is legitimate. He flips on his lights, and the truck pulls over to the side of the road. A routine traffic stop. Or so it seemed. The officer approaches the driver's side window. He asks Lopez for his license and registration. Standard procedure. Lopez complies. But as the officer is standing there, talking to him, he notices something else. Lopez seems unusually nervous. His hands are trembling slightly. He's avoiding eye contact, and his answers are short and clipped. The officer's training kicks in. This isn't just someone nervous about a ticket. This feels different. The officer's internal alarm bells are ringing louder now. He has a gut feeling that there's more to this situation than just a missing license plate. He asks Lopez to step out of the vehicle. Lopez hesitates for a second, a flicker of indecision in his eyes. And then, in a split second, everything changes. Instead of getting out, Lopez floors it. The truck's tires screech as it peels away, leaving the officer standing in a cloud of exhaust. The routine traffic stop is officially over. A high-speed pursuit has just begun. The officer races back to his patrol car, radios in that the suspect is fleeing, and takes off in hot pursuit. The chase is on. Weaving through traffic, Lopez is driving recklessly, dangerously. He's clearly desperate to get away. The officer is right behind him, trying to keep up while also ensuring public safety. The chase continues for several miles, a blur of flashing lights and screeching tires. Finally, Lopez makes a sharp turn, pulls into a driveway, and abandons the truck, taking off on foot. The officer isn't far behind. He calls for backup and begins to search the area where Lopez was last seen. The quiet neighborhood is now a crime scene, swarming with police. After a tense search, officers find Lopez hiding in a nearby backyard. He's cornered. He surrenders without any further resistance. The chase is over. Back at the truck, officers conduct a search, and what they find explains Lopez's desperation. Tucked away inside the vehicle is a significant amount of illegal substances and a loaded firearm. This was never about a missing license plate. For Lopez, getting pulled over was the start of a much bigger problem, one that could land him in prison for a very long time. So, Lopez is arrested and charged with a slew of felonies, including drug trafficking and illegal possession of a firearm. The case seems open and shut. He was caught red-handed after a dramatic police chase. What could possibly be his defense? Well, this is where the story takes a fascinating legal turn. Lopez's defense attorney didn't argue that the drugs and gun weren't his. Instead, he made a much more fundamental argument. He claimed that the entire traffic stop, the very first action the officer took, was illegal. The argument was simple but powerful. The officer pulled Lopez over for not having a permanent license plate, but the truck did have a temporary registration tag displayed in the window, which was perfectly legal under California law at the time. The defense argued that the officer had no valid reason, no reasonable suspicion of a crime, to initiate the stop in the first place. Therefore, everything that happened after the stop, the chase, the arrest, the discovery of the drugs and gun, was fruit of the poisonous tree. In legal terms, if the initial stop is unconstitutional, any evidence found as a result of that stop cannot be used in court. The trial court agreed with the defense. The judge ruled that the officer had made a mistake of law. Even though the officer acted in good faith, believing a law was being broken, his belief was incorrect. The temporary tag was legal. Therefore, the stop was not justified. The evidence was suppressed, and the case against Lopez collapsed. The charges were dismissed. You might think that's the end of the story. A man caught with drugs and a gun walks free on a legal technicality. But the state of California wasn't ready to let it go. The prosecution appealed the trial court's decision. They argued that the officer's mistake was reasonable. The law regarding temporary tags could be confusing, and the officer made an honest error. They believed that such a reasonable mistake of law should invalidate a stop and let a potentially dangerous criminal go free. The case moved up to the California Court of Appeal. The appellate court sided with the prosecution. They reversed the trial court's decision, stating that an officer's reasonable mistake of law could, in fact, provide the necessary reasonable suspicion for a traffic stop. The evidence was back in, and the charges against Lopez were reinstated. Now, it was the defense's turn to appeal. They took the case to the California Supreme Court, the highest court in the state. The question before them was a critical one for law enforcement and civil liberties alike. Can a police officer's misunderstanding of the law justify a traffic stop? The California Supreme Court reviewed the case, the arguments, and the precedents. And in a landmark decision, they sided with Lopez. They reversed the appellate court's ruling, agreeing with the original trial court. They stated that ignorance of the law is no excuse, and that applies to police officers just as much as it does to citizens. An officer's good faith mistake about what the law actually says cannot be the basis for a constitutional traffic stop. The court's reasoning was clear. If police were allowed to stop people based on incorrect interpretations of the law, it would open the door to arbitrary and potentially discriminatory enforcement. It would grant police far too much power and erode the protections guaranteed by the Fourth Amendment, which protects citizens from unreasonable searches and seizures. The final ruling was in. The stop was illegal. The evidence was inadmissible. Arthur Lopez, who had been facing years in prison, was a free man. This case, which all started with a missing license plate, had a huge impact. It sent a clear message to law enforcement agencies across California and the nation. Officers must have a firm and accurate understanding of the law before they can detain a citizen. It reinforced the principle that the ends do not justify the means. No matter how serious the evidence found later, if the initial police action was unconstitutional, the entire case built upon it must fall. It is a powerful reminder of the delicate balance between empowering police to do their jobs and protecting the fundamental rights of every individual. A balance that, in this instance, was tested by a simple traffic stop that turned into one of the most significant legal battles of the decade. Thanks for watching. If you found this case as fascinating as I did, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more deep dives into the stories behind the headlines. See you next time. Thanks for watching once again. Can't wait to share the next true crime story from somewhere else in the world. Stay tuned. On an otherwise ordinary evening, the bustling life of Camden Row in London came to an abrupt, chilling halt. Residents peered from their windows, their usual nightly routine shattered by a sea of flashing blue lights and the silent, imposing presence of British police. A cordon was thrown up, sealing the entire street from the outside world. No one was allowed in, and no one was allowed out. What was happening on Camden Row? Why the sudden, deafening silence enforced by a wall of authority? Tonight, we peel back the layers of secrecy surrounding one of London's most perplexing police operations. This is the story of the night the silence fell on Camden Row. It all began just after 9 p.m. Witnesses recall the first police car arriving without sirens, a single, ghost-like vehicle gliding to a stop at the corner of Camden Row and Islington Avenue. Within minutes, it was joined by another, and then another. There was no chaos, no shouting, just a quiet, methodical occupation of the street. Officers moved with a disciplined urgency, unspooling yellow tape that glinted under the streetlights. Residents who were out walking their dogs or returning from a late shift found their paths blocked by stern-faced constables offering no explanation. Only a simple, firm command: the street is closed. Please return to your homes. For those already inside, a strange sense of unease began to creep in. The usual sounds of the city, the distant traffic, the chatter from the pub on the corner, faded away, replaced by an unsettling quiet, punctuated only by the crackle of police radios. The information vacuum was immediate and absolute. Social media lit up with frantic speculation. Was it a bomb threat? A major crime scene? A counter-terrorism raid? Every theory seemed plausible, yet none could be confirmed. Local news crews arrived, their cameras aimed at the impenetrable police line, but they were kept at a distance, their questions met with a resolute no comment. This lack of official information was unusual. Typically, in a major incident, the police would issue a brief statement to quell public anxiety. But on this night, the silence from the authorities was as thick and imposing as the physical blockade itself. This deliberate information blackout only fueled the growing sense of dread among the trapped residents and the watching world. Something significant was unfolding behind that tape, and the police were determined to keep it under wraps. Inside the cordon, life ground to a standstill. A food delivery driver, his thermal bag growing cold, was politely but firmly turned away. A young couple, returning from a date, pleaded with officers to let them get to their flat, only to be told they'd have to wait. The minutes stretched into an hour, then two. Through their windows, residents watched shadowy figures move in the darkness. Specialized units began to arrive, forensics in their stark white suits, plainclothes detectives in unmarked cars, and even a command vehicle, its roof bristling with antennas. The scale of the operation suggested this was far more than a routine police matter. The air was thick with tension. Every flicker of movement, every hushed conversation between officers was scrutinized by dozens of pairs of eyes, all trying to piece together the puzzle of what was happening right on their doorstep. Then, around midnight, the focus of the operation became clear. Police activity converged on a single terraced house in the middle of the row, number 237. It was an unremarkable building, indistinguishable from its neighbors, save for the fact that it was now the epicenter of this massive police presence. Lights inside the house, previously dark, flickered on. Officers began to move in and out, not with the dynamic entry of a raid, but with a slow, careful precision. Forensics teams could be seen through the windows, their torches creating strange, dancing patterns on the walls. They weren't kicking down doors. They were treating the house like an archaeological dig, a place where every speck of dust could hold a vital clue. What secrets did number 237 hold? And who were the people who lived within its walls? The mystery of Camden Row had just found its heart. The residents of number 237 were a quiet, enigmatic couple, known to neighbors only as Mr. and Mrs. Davies. They had moved in about 6 months prior and largely kept to themselves. They were polite but distant, offering a brief nod in passing but never engaging in conversation. Neighbors described them as meticulously private. Their curtains were always drawn, and they received few, if any, visitors. Some found their reclusiveness odd, while others simply assumed they were people who valued their privacy. No one could recall any strange noises, any arguments, or anything at all that would suggest trouble. They were, for all intents and purposes, invisible. And now, their quiet, anonymous existence had become the focus of a major police investigation that had brought an entire London street to a standstill. The question on everyone's lips was simple. Who were the Davieses, really? As the forensics teams worked meticulously inside number 237, a different kind of investigation was unfolding online. Amateur sleuths and concerned locals began to dig into the history of the house and its previous occupants. Public records showed nothing unusual. The house had been sold 6 months ago through a reputable estate agent. But then, a user on a local community forum posted something that sent a shiver through the digital crowd. They had found an old news article from 20 years ago, detailing a high-profile, unsolved art heist in Brussels. The prize? A collection of rare 17th-century manuscripts. The estimated value was in the millions. The key detail that caught everyone's attention was the description of the two main suspects, a man and a woman, known for their sophisticated methods and their ability to vanish without a trace. Their police sketch bore a striking, if aged, resemblance to the couple known as the Davieses. Could it be possible? Could the quiet couple on Camden Row be the infamous international art thieves who had disappeared 2 decades ago? It seemed like something out of a movie. But as the night wore on, the theory gained traction. The sheer scale of the police presence, the involvement of what looked like National Crime Agency officers, and the intense, careful search of the property, it all pointed to something far more complex than a typical domestic incident. The police weren't just searching a house. They were searching for a past. They were looking for evidence that could close a case that had been cold for 20 years. The silence on Camden Row wasn't just about controlling a scene. It was about preventing the suspects from learning they had finally been found, giving them no chance to destroy the evidence the police were so desperate to find. Just before dawn, after nearly 8 hours of tense silence, the operation reached its climax. 2 figures, their faces obscured by coats held up by detectives, were escorted from number 237. They were placed into separate, unmarked cars, which then slipped away into the early morning light as silently as they had arrived. There was no struggle, no drama. It was the quiet, almost anticlimactic end to a night of immense tension. A few hours later, the police tape came down. The command vehicles departed, and the street was reopened. Traffic started to flow again, and the familiar sounds of London life returned to Camden Row. It was as if nothing had happened. But for the residents, the memory of the silent, occupied street would linger. The official police statement, when it finally came, was brief and carefully worded. It confirmed that 2 individuals had been arrested in connection with an ongoing international investigation and that the operation had concluded. They offered no further details. In the days that followed, investigative journalists connected the dots. The arrested couple were indeed the prime suspects in the 2-decade-old Brussels art heist. For 20 years, they had lived under various aliases across Europe, always one step ahead of the law. Their quiet life on Camden Row was the latest and final chapter of their life on the run. It was revealed that a breakthrough had come from a newly developed facial recognition technology that matched a recent, incidental photo of Mr. Davies to the old suspect sketch. The police operation on Camden Row was so secretive because they weren't just arresting the suspects. They were hoping to recover the stolen manuscripts, which they believed were hidden somewhere inside the house. And they were successful. Buried beneath the floorboards of the master bedroom, wrapped in oilcloth, was the entire collection, perfectly preserved. The night the silence fell on Camden Row was a masterclass in patient, methodical police work. It was a story that unfolded not with a bang, but with a whisper. A story of a past that finally caught up with the present, played out on a quiet residential street in the heart of London. It serves as a stark reminder that sometimes the most extraordinary secrets are hidden behind the most ordinary doors. The residents of Camden Row will never look at their street the same way again, forever haunted by the memory of the night their world went quiet, and a 20-year-old mystery was finally solved. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into fascinating true stories. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching once again. Can't wait to share the next true crime story from somewhere else in the world. Stay tuned. Mark, ever so meticulous, would just sigh and clean up, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. But then the small annoyances began to escalate. The Wi-Fi would inexplicably cut out during Liam's crucial client calls. Mark's meticulously organized comic book collection would be found in disarray, spines slightly bent. Passive-aggressive notes started appearing on the fridge, their cheerful, smiley faces belying a growing hostility. Liam would come home to find the thermostat cranked up to a sweltering temperature, knowing Mark preferred the cold. Mark would find his expensive noise-canceling headphones missing just when he needed to focus, only for them to reappear days later in the vegetable crisper. It was a silent war, a battle of wits fought in the shared spaces of their home. Their friends, when they visited separately, heard two very different stories. To Liam's friends, Mark was a controlling neat freak. To Mark's friends, Liam was a chaotic slob who had no respect for personal property. Neither was entirely wrong, but neither was entirely right. One Monday morning, Liam woke up to find his Wacom tablet, his most prized and essential tool for work, completely gone. This was different. This wasn't a prank. This was sabotage. He stormed into Mark's room, ready for a confrontation, but found it empty. Mark was gone, and so was his car. Liam's panic turned to ice-cold dread when he noticed the dark, sticky stains seeping into the hallway carpet, right outside Mark's bedroom door. A single, ominous trail led from the stain towards the back door. Fearing the worst, Liam called the police. When Detective Harding arrived, she found a scene that was both ordinary and deeply unsettling. A half-eaten pizza on the coffee table, video games paused mid-battle. It looked like a typical bachelor pad, except for the eerie silence, the palpable tension, and the dark stain on the floor. Harding was a veteran. She'd seen it all, but something about this case felt off. There was no sign of forced entry. Nothing of significant value, apart from Mark and his car, was missing. Liam, looking pale and shaken, recounted the escalating war of attrition with his roommate. He explained the pranks, the notes, the growing resentment. He insisted he had nothing to do with Mark's disappearance, but Harding could see the suspicion in her partner's eyes. A missing person, a potential bloodstain, and an argumentative roommate. It was a classic, almost textbook scenario. The lab results came back for the stain on the carpet. It wasn't blood. It was cherry cola. A collective sigh of relief was quickly followed by a new wave of confusion. Was this another elaborate prank? Days turned into a week. Mark's phone went straight to voicemail. His bank account was untouched. His social media, usually active with coding memes and sci-fi trivia, was silent. Liam was a mess. The police were treating him like the prime suspect. His work was suffering. He started his own investigation, poring over Mark's digital footprint, trying to find a clue, any clue that the police might have missed. He hacked into Mark's computer, a skill he picked up from online tutorials, feeling a pang of guilt that was quickly overshadowed by desperation. What package? Liam's mind raced. He tore the apartment apart, searching for anything, a hidden safe, a loose floorboard. He remembered Mark's obsession with his vintage comic book collection. He ran to the shelf. The comics were all graded and sealed in plastic cases. But one, the Silver Surfer, number 3, looked different. The plastic casing felt slightly thicker. With trembling hands, Liam carefully cracked it open. Tucked behind the comic book was a tiny, wafer-thin USB drive. The package. At that exact moment, the front door lock clicked. Liam's heart leaped into his throat. He wasn't expecting anyone. He grabbed the heaviest object nearby, a glass paperweight, and flattened himself against the wall by the door. The door swung open, and a figure stepped inside. It was Mark. He looked exhausted, thinner, but he was alive. Before Liam could say a word, Mark put a finger to his lips, his eyes wide with fear, and pointed towards the window. Across the street, in a parked car, 2 men in dark suits were watching their building. They followed me, Mark whispered, his voice hoarse. I had to make it look like I was gone for good. The cola stain, my car, everything. It was to throw them off, to buy me some time. He explained everything. The company he worked for was illegally selling user data. He had proof, and he was going to expose them. Project Nightingale was his plan to leak the data to a journalist. But they found out. The men in the car weren't police. They were corporate security, hired to retrieve the data at any cost. Suddenly, the escalating roommate pranks made a different kind of sense. Mark hadn't been trying to drive Liam crazy. He had been trying to drive him out. I needed you to leave, Liam, Mark admitted. I didn't want you to get caught in the crossfire. I was trying to protect you. The misplaced items, the thermostat wars, the sabotaged Wi-Fi. It was all a desperate, albeit clumsy, attempt to make Liam so miserable that he would move out and be safe. There was no time for apologies or explanations. They could hear footsteps on the stairs. The men were coming. We have to go, now, Mark said, grabbing the USB drive from Liam's hand. They scrambled to the fire escape, just as the sound of their front door being splintered open echoed through the apartment. They clambered down the metal ladder into the back alley, sirens wailing in the distance. Liam had called Detective Harding before Mark even finished his story, giving her the address and a cryptic message. Project Nightingale is a go. Harding, trusting her gut instinct that this was more than a simple roommate squabble, had acted fast. As Liam and Mark sprinted down the alley, police cars screeched to a halt at both ends, trapping the 2 corporate thugs inside the building. Standing in the alley, catching their breath under the flashing red and blue lights, the 2 roommates looked at each other. The tension that had defined their relationship for months had vanished, replaced by a shared sense of relief and adrenaline. The next day, the story was all over the news. The tech company was under federal investigation, thanks to the data on Mark's USB drive. Mark was hailed as a hero. Back at the apartment, now a proper crime scene swarming with federal agents, Detective Harding found Liam and Mark sitting on the curb. You know, she said with a tired smile, for 2 guys who apparently hated each other, you make a pretty good team. Mark turned to Liam. So, he started, a small, genuine smile forming on his face. I guess I owe you for a new Wacom tablet. Liam laughed, a real, hearty laugh. Yeah, you do. And maybe we can agree on a thermostat setting from now on. The war was over. The apartment that had been their battleground was now just a place they shared. They were still roommates by chance, but they were no longer enemies. They were something else entirely. Something a lot closer to friends. They had a long way to go, and probably a lot of cleaning up to do, but for the first time, it felt like home. Thank you so much for watching. What a wild ride, right? It just goes to show you never really know what's going on with the people you live with. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more mysteries. And let me know in the comments, what's the craziest roommate story you've ever heard? see you in the next video.